Alright everybody, we are back with acrylic ornament making with a little bit more emphasis on the weeding aspect and the vinyls themselves. We're going to start with this beautiful sparkly green foil. Now, unfortunately I did not have the silver holographic that I did the last video. That happens. I was out after 2 sheets. I did have this beautiful green holographic glitter foil. It does behave similarly to the silver foil. It can be hard to weed, so it's best to actually cut rough shapes around each of your individual designs, so that way it doesn't fold up on itself and actually pull up the designs on you. That can happen with really any vinyl. It adores doing it with foil. Foil just loves to stick to itself, as you can see with me pulling up around the cross. And even with good settings, there are times where it's not going to want to lift up properly because it's not going to be fully cut with your vinyl cutter. Each vinyl cutter is going to require its own settings for each type of vinyl. Now, you're going to have to play a little bit of guessing games to test it out. I recommend having a notebook to write out each individual settings and what got easier, what got harder. I actually have such a notebook, because once you get your settings right, it's going to be easy-ish, depending on the vinyl, to take and weed out your excess. For this foil, I had actually referred to the silver holographic notes that I had written down, and that is why this is actually as easy as it is to weed. And of course, I'm still making sure to cut shapes around each individual design. Now, as you can tell, I've got it pretty heavily packed, and I do recommend this if you're not selling like big decals or making larger decals. If you're making a bunch of decals for use as design elements in other projects, I always recommend pack it as heavy as you can for the cutting apart, because really you want to conserve as much as possible, because that'll in the long run save you money as well as be a heck of a lot more eco-friendly. Now, as you can tell, I've got the berries cut out for the holly. Those are going to be going bye-bye here in a second. Okay, I take that back. A lot more than a second. Now, as you can tell, I am pulling out dots out of the crosses and putting them on a different sheet. I'm using a backing for my transfer tape. I always recommend getting that. You can find that online for anywhere from really inexpensive to exorbitant as far as price goes. Best to find the ones you like. Me, I like the one that that comes rolled up with the backing, because then I can actually recycle the backing for things like this, where I'm removing the berries, because I intend to make 2-color designs for these ornaments with the holly leaves. So the berries, I'm just popping off, putting onto a different sheet. That's kind of the cool part about foil, is if you're really careful, you can actually conserve the entire cutout of the design and place it elsewhere and use it for something else completely. Now, this red is Orifal, and I goofed up on my settings. Went a little too deep, a little too hard, and so I ended up cutting the backing. Now the cool part about the Orifal, it is actually car vinyl, so it will have a silver backing on it, and it weeds so easily. I did not need my settings the way I did. They were too rough on this vinyl, and honestly, it survived really well. It weeds so nicely. I don't have to cut around the design, each individual design. I just needed to make a nice sized stripe. And once again, I'm conserving what I can. Those circles actually come out really nice. Car vinyl is thinner than even your standard Oracal 651, because it's made to go up and over the curves that you will find on a vehicle. So in order to stretch it and mold it, and in some places make a seam that is somewhat invisible, this vinyl needs to be thin as a result. And this one's a metallic glitter red that, from what I understand, is not being made anymore. Now that information I have not been able to verify. However, the friend who gave it to me is exceedingly trustworthy and absolutely adore her. Hello, Brandy. This woman is the reason I have so much vinyl. She brought me what she deemed some. That was a box that basically, as soon as I opened it up, went and essentially exploded. She did warn me I was going to have to process each of this to fit my individual machine. She's got a different size. That's quite alright. And what this woman calls some, I am hesitant to wonder exactly what a lot looks like, according to her. I digress. It's beautiful vinyl, and me removing the green berries so that way I can put up the red berries. Oh yes, I enjoy it. As you can tell, I'm putting on the transfer tape, and oops, that can happen. Now, there's several ways to fix that. My favorite is usually just cutting off a little bit of the bottom, the excess. If I have to, I will cut a whole section off of a sheet that I've cut. But in this case, I can actually cut from the bottom. Just, quick swipe with the X-Acto knife or a pair of scissors, and line up those lines, and there you go. Now, the Orifal, I do have to be careful with my designs themselves, because if it's too small, then the pieces, being as fine as they are, can kind of get bound up in the blade. That happens. This particular vinyl right here, the silver, is StarCraft. Now this takes about the same settings as my Oracal 651 does, and definitely heavier settings than the car vinyl. I was way too rough with that car vinyl, and thankfully it still managed to survive and do well. Now, StarCraft vinyl, I do like it. In this case, it weeds rather nicely. I'm using big bold shapes that are, relatively speaking, complicated. Unfortunately, that was a bit too rough, and found that I couldn't conserve the inner star pieces like I was hoping. And that's alright. You're not always going to be able to conserve the pieces, so be prepared for that. That just happens. If you can conserve, absolutely. Conserve, and conserve away. Alright, and now once you've got your transfer tape on, you're going to want to cut it. Now, your Cry-Cut paper cutter does really nice, beautiful straight lines if you do your own retail of stuff, or you can use scissors or an X-Acto knife. Now, if you use the Cry-Cut cutter, you're going to want to get replacement blades, and they don't actually have to be the Cry-Cut brand. They could be any brand. I just get whatever I can that's fairly cheap. Now, not everything's going to be able to be cut with that cutter. Just to let you know, when you've got groupings this small, you're going to want to cut them with scissors, or again, the tiny X-Acto knife. Now, for brevity's sake, I'm just going to do one of each design for these ornaments. Now, this is more of a copper color. This is the Orcal 651. As you can tell, similarly to the StarCraft Vinyl, it weeds really nicely. I think I got this at Michael's. It's called Antique Gold. I find it to be more of a copper. So, of course, I used it for the deer and the bells. And same thing applies here with cutting out individual pieces after weeding. Every once in a while you're going to have an overage with your transfer tape. Just, give it a quick trim off. You're going to need the acrylic blanks, much like last time. And honestly, they're really rather inexpensive. And they're fun to use. You can even use them for keychains if you want. Oops! I grabbed the wrong decal. Those ones were from last video. So, let's get out the ones we're actually going to use this time. And get cracking. Now, as you've been able to see so far, putting the decals onto the acrylic blanks really isn't all that difficult. There's a lot of different shapes that you can get at a lot of different places, your favorite craft store, whichever evil online corporation you want to go to. or anywhere else for that matter. It's pretty fun. And you can also use sheet stickers instead of decals if you don't have a vinyl cutter, by the way, or access to one. Now, if you like what I have shown you here today, subscribe and you'll be able to see more. So have a good one.